Hello and welcome to Reddit Roast number 51. Now, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Sam.
So, for those of you who've not watched Reddit Roast before, what we do is we trawl through, or Mal trawls through Reddit to find people who are looking to have their profile evaluated. And so then we roast them and we roast their profile. We find the strengths, we find the weaknesses of their profile. We answer any lingering questions they've got and, frankly, set them up, hopefully, for a good start in the MBA application process. So, Mal, who have we got today?
So today we have two deferred MBA candidates. Both have really strong profiles and they're going head to head for the same roles. We've also got a special roast request from our Reddit DMs that we'll be tackling. And we have a high stakes litigation lawyer who's dabbling in medical malpractice. There's also a bonus dilemma where OP has multiple scholarship offers and a great job offer. It's honestly not a bad place to be, but we'll help OP decide.
Excellent. Looking forward to it. Right, let's dive into the first head to head. We've never done a head to head before. So this is a bit of
Never
a first.
fun.
If it's a mess, just say if it's a mess, I'm sorry. But we're going to try and
We'll try.
compare these two candidates who are directly, I think, applying for exactly the same school. Is that right, Mel?
Yeah. HSW, MIT Sloan, and Columbia. Both
Deferred programs.
deferred programs. Round one next year, we will see.
All
All
right,
right.
let's see who's got the higher chance of getting admitted then. Walk me through
Yeah.
these.
All right, so I'm going to go with profile one on the left first. Urgent,
Mhm,
should I retake GMAT FE?
mhm.
I'm applying for the deferred MBA and I'm super worried about my GMAT score. Target schools, Sloan, HBS, GSB, Wharton, and Columbia. Ethnicity, Middle Eastern female and international student. University in Canada with a full tuition scholarship. OP has a GPA of 3.75 and will graduate with distinction. GMAT Focus 675. But OP is worried about that score because she says she's messed up the quant because she's super stressed about the whole Middle East situation. But in her transcript, all of her math courses are an A plus. Work
Mm.
experience at two FANGs, two hedge funds, one AI lab, and one unicorn. OP also worked full time for the FANG company in the school year as a contractor. Research has two papers under review, 2 years of teaching assistantship, and has received a grant. Extracurriculars, two VC-based fellowships in Silicon Valley. Also won a funding for developing my nonprofit project, which we tested in multiple organizations. And then there's also women in CS things and top in Canada in a trading competition. Postgraduate plans, OP has return offers from all of her internships and is currently planning on a startup, which is a very early stage startup. We'll get to your questions, OP. Let's dive into
Do a
our
side by side. Let's
yeah,
do
let's
the
do
other
it
one. Tell me, who are they
together.
up? Who is she up against then?
So OP is up against a 23-year-old male Italian applicant who's also applying to the deferred MBAs at the same schools. Undergrad management at Bocconi with a 4.0 GPA, a full merit scholarship received. There was an exchange year at LSE. Grad OP has done a double degree in data science and finance at École Polytechnique with a 3.8 GPA and a scholarship, and HEC Paris with 3.6 GPA. GMAT is 695, work experience at a real estate PE mega fund in London with an offer to return IB at a no-name Italian bank, research projects at Harvard, Bocconi, and LSE. Entrepreneurial experience. OP has created an interview prep platform with 2,000 users, launching a mentoring program for students in finance, extracurriculars, church volunteering during high school, student clubs in undergrad, and founded a student club for networking in his master's. OP speaks Italian, English, and French. Concerned about the GPA. So both of them have academic concerns. One's about the GMAT, the other's the GPA. What do you think of their profiles?
Okay, let's dive in head to head. First, let's talk about so yeah, we've said the target schools, exactly the same set. Deferred application, same schools, same time, everything. So, first, I want to focus on, let's talk about the demographic of each group. So, the candidate on the left is a Middle Eastern female. That is about as underrepresented as it gets in the world of MBA admissions. Not, I mean, maybe a few random niche cases, but very, very underrepresented. Middle Eastern male, less so, but Middle Eastern female with a strong, professional work experience and all, and It's just a very, very attractive profile for business schools. On the other hand, the Italian male, now I'm going to make some assumptions here. Forgive me, Italian male, if I'm overstepping here, but let's just make some assumptions for the sake of it. I assume that OP is a white Italian male working in finance. Like that is a very overrepresented, very stereotypical background. So in terms of demographics, lefty wins it, definitely. Okay, from an MBA perspective, obviously, this is a very underrepresented candidate versus a very overrepresented candidate. So let's move on to academics. Both of them have got full merit scholarships, right? So
Yeah.
that is insane, right? That's really, really high. There's a couple of slight differences, though, in terms of these academic profiles. So for those North Americans watching and Indians watching who aren't familiar with the UK, the European education system, Bocconi, École Polytechnique, and HEC Paris is the creme de la creme. It's the Ivy League of European universities. At undergrad level, to get into these schools, particularly with full scholarships, is an incredibly strong achievement from an academic perspective. So absolutely epic. A 695 GMAT is still strong, but it's not incredible. Look, OP is not mother tongue English. So he's done a 695 without being mother tongue English. That means there's a very high quant score there and an okay verbal score. Basically, that is a strong, very strong academic profile. The downsides is that this is a self-converted GPA, I think. And we'll talk about that in a moment because of this downward GPA trend that OP is talking about. It sounds like that is a self-converted GPA and that is not going to be the GPA that gets contributed to the rankings by the schools. They only contribute the GPAs that are on a 4.0 scale. All of this to say that those are very, very strong grades that speak to your intelligence, but they don't help the school when it comes to rankings because it's not a 4.0 GPA grade. It's not an American grade. And that is a slight disadvantage. Now, let's talk about the left profiles academics. 3.75 is still strong, not exceptional, but it's still strong. It has the advantage of being at a school that is on a 4.0 scale and therefore gets submitted to the rankings and would positively influence the average of about 3.6 for the M7 kind of top schools. So, and then the 675, now solid, but not exceptional, particularly for deferred MBA candidates. Now, deferred MBA candidates tend to be expected to have higher GMAT scores. Why? Look, you're still in study mode, right? You're still in that student study mode. You've got access to a library around the corner. Like that should work to your advantage. You're not distracted by a full-time job in the same way that someone working in banking or at McKinsey has got 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day in the office. They can't really study during that time. That's also another factor. So for all of these reasons, deferred MBA applicants are expected to have slightly higher GMAT scores. 675 is not great. And as OP says, should I retake the GMAT? That is probably her Achilles heel in this application set. And it's interesting that it's basically the quant side of the test that OP is struggling with. Net, I've got these two profiles as roughly equal in terms of academics. On the one hand, a lower GMAT and a slightly lower GPA on the left. But on the other hand, it's on a US GPA system, which means it directly contributes to grades, to academic averages for the schools, which profile on the right doesn't. So more or less equal, I would say, for these two. Now, that's on the academic side. The other thing I should mention is that OP's master's grades on the right do not really have an effect either on this. They're nice, they're strong, they're good schools, but master's grades do not contribute to the average the school submits. They're only ranked on their undergrad average. So these grades do not have that much direct impact. Not doing any harm, but not as much benefit as you perhaps think they might be. So anyway, let's keep moving. From a work experience perspective, right? This profile on the left has got FANG, hedge fund, AI lab, unicorn, and receive full-time offers to all. I think she said, yeah, here, return offers from all of them. That is about as good a work experience as you can have at that age. I don't see anything you could do differently. You've got a bunch of interesting, diverse internships, and you've got offers from all of them. Can't ask for any more, right? I can't ask for any more here. Um, Interesting that the yeah, okay. So that's on that side. Now, on the other hand, working in a private equity mega fund in London for a finance bro is about as good as you can get as well. This is
Mhm.
what thousands of finance aspirants, sort of finance focused students in Europe are aspiring to do. I mean, thousands, tens of thousands, I would say. So this is about as good as it gets as well on the professional side on the right. The IB at a no-name Italian bank is obviously less strong, etc., etc. But there is really a strong work experience at both of those. So I'm putting these two at more or less equal in terms of their chances at business school. So let's keep going. Research. Both of them mention research papers, a couple of under review. I think there was a mention of some research on the right as well. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, basically, research doesn't really matter that much. There are lots of academic programs, masters and PhD programs, full of nerds who really care about writing academic research, and you get into
Mhm.
those programs based on things like that. MBAs don't
Mhm.
really care about academic research, right? This is a business degree. They care about your business impact way more. So no big deal on the research at the two for these two profiles. The TAs could show a little bit, or TA ship could be framed from a leadership perspective potentially, and that's a separate story. But just from a research perspective, we don't care. Okay, extracurriculars. And this is where things start to maybe diverge a little bit more. The profile on the left has got two VC based fellowships in Silicon Valley, also one funding to develop my non-profit, a bit of women in computer science stuff, and top in Canada in a trading competition. Pretty strong extracurriculars in there. Nothing, we haven't got that much detail, so I don't know how much of this is going to be leadership focused, which would be the best. But with the TA ship, the teacher assistants as well, I think there's a good leadership story in there somewhere. I give her the benefit of the doubt. I really think that's a very strong extracurricular profile. On the other hand, the extracurricular profile of the finance bro, to be slightly cynical, is not as strong. Now, this is kind of a classic situation. And I say this as a former investment banker, as a white male investment banker who went through the European education system. I have a right to speak on this. The focus on extracurriculars, particularly at the college admissions stage, is not as high in Europe. There's much more focus on grades, on academic excellence. There isn't so much focus on extracurriculars. So guys like this who have got into top, broken into finance, just like I did, tend not to have the extracurriculars that their American counterparts have. And this is a classic case in point of that. We've got much less extracurriculars in the finance profile than in the profile on the left. Maybe there's more there. Maybe it's just that he hasn't dedicated as much experience, as much space on the evaluation to this, but I really don't think there is as much there. So we have we're second point in advantage. What's the word? 2-0, you could say, to the profile on the left. Okay. In terms of goals, not entirely clear to me. Long-term goals, but we do know more or less what they're going to be doing in the next few years, and that's a good start. Basically, both of them have secured full-time work at great companies. So in terms of goals, I would put them more or less equal. As we start talking about like things they can do better, goals is something we can talk about. But as things stand, I would say both of them are pretty meh in terms of goals. I don't get the sense, and either of them have really thought that far ahead in terms of their goals. If they had, that might put one of them at a slight advantage here. But goals are more or less equal. So at the moment, as things stand, profile, they're very, very similar. I would say profile on the left is slightly stronger from a demographic and extracurricular perspective. The profile on the right is very strong in every way that he can be, except for there isn't that flair. It's academically very strong, but there isn't that outside of work, outside of school flair that profile on the left has, and which matters so much for the top US schools. So a bit of a rant there. They've both got individual questions. Should we maybe start with just the high levels that apply to both of them? I see one of the questions is, do they have a shot? Do I have a shot? They're both asking.
Yeah.
And the short answer is yes. I'm nitpicking here, finding slight differences between the two. But high level, both of these profiles have earned the right to apply for these top MBA programs. Guaranteed offers? Absolutely not. Earn the right? Yes. Give it a good shot.
Yeah. And what do you think can both profiles do to improve these chances?
Right, good question. So the next steps for both of them. Now, bearing in mind that the deadlines are coming up for these deferred applications, I think 20 something of April is so in about 2 weeks from time of recording is the HBS and Wharton deadlines. That said, for those watching who aren't specifically these people, I'm going to focus on the whole picture that could be improved. Okay, profile on the left. That GMAT, as OP has said, is really not quite where it needs to be for deferred applications. Still a chance, still, offset by other things. But ideally, I'd like that for a deferred application. I'd like that GMAT to be around the level of profile on the right. 695 and higher is really kind of the benchmark that I like to point people towards, particularly because it's weak quant, which also is a factor here. It's all right. You can get away with having a weak score if it's because of weak verbal, but weak quant is going to raise a few eyebrows. So that's a little bit of a concern for profile on the left, and definitely something that could be improved. Also, for both candidates, I'd like you to start drilling into these goals. You need to start drilling into these goals in more detail. It looks like both of them are secure for the next 3 or 4 years pre-MBA. But what do you stand for? Right? What are you going to contribute to the world? I know it's early in your career to be figuring this out, but let me give you some examples. For example, profile on the left. It has got a whole bunch of diverse experience, and it sounds like it's going to be spending at least some of the time in the next few years focusing on startup. Okay, what's that startup going to do for the world? What global problem are you going to challenge? Are you going to tackle with that startup? And why does that matter to you? Why does that problem matter to you? We're starting to veer into the what matters most kind of territory for Stanford, the Stanford application. Both profiles, although young, need to develop an element of social benefit. What is the world? How is the world going to benefit from letting these candidates into the class? The one on the right, it's a very good example of this. What, are you going to make more money at a PE mega fund? Is that really what you think you're going to contribute to the world? And if so, do you really think they're going to let you in with that as a goal? No, of course not. How are you going to contribute positively to the world? It's time to start thinking about that for both profiles, especially profile on the right. Okay. Next, I want to touch a little bit on this. This candidate is asking about downward GPA trend. The finance bro is asking about the downward GPA trend. Now, a bit of confusion on this for me, because he says that his GPA is 4.0. Now, if you've got a 4.0, you haven't got a downward GPA trend, because it's by definition perfect. So I think what's happened here, and I'm reading between the lines, but I think OP has got a degree from Bocconi, which is not on a 4.0 scale. He has converted it. And just like in the UK, a first automatically basically translates to a 4.0. There is wiggle room within a first, and there isn't wiggle room within a 4. So what I think has happened is OP has gone from like a high first, basically, to a lower first. Still a four, both of them convert to a 4.0, but there is a downward trend. All of that to say, if you've got a 4.0, nobody is going to question your academic abilities in terms of your intelligence. Don't even mention this downward trend. Seriously, OP. No one is going to look at this and think, "Oh, you're not very smart. We're not sure you're going to hack the academic abilities of the program." No, academically, you're absolutely golden. They're going to be more worried about the extracurriculars and the community contribution, etc. So, to answer that question, main concern is my downward trend in my GPA. Should I address it? No. Shut up about that. Don't mention it.
I think OP might be referring to that master's downward trend because he's got a 4.0 in his undergrad, then a 3.8 at in the French grading system.
Ah, okay. Point
In
taken.
which case, it's even less of a worry.
Even less of a worry. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They don't care about your master's GPA at all. I mean, for you, it was a big deal. You work really hard and you think it's important. It's not. Only the undergrad GPA matters. So if that was a slightly falling GPA on the undergrad side, it doesn't matter. If you're referring to the difference between your undergrad and your master's, it also doesn't matter. Either way, don't mention it.
Yeah. I think the bigger case for P to argue would be why do you need an MBA after doing a master's double degree in the data?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I wouldn't put that in the additional info section, to be clear, but I would put that is something to perhaps consider, particularly in an interview setting. That's a classic interview question that they could get asked. There is a sort of stereotype of people who just love going to university and they do an undergrad, and they do a master's and another master's and a PhD, and then they want to apply for an MBA. And unis, business schools in particular, look a little bit cynically on those people. There needs to be a really concrete reason why you need an MBA. What are you going to learn from your MBA that you didn't learn at École Polytechnique?
Mhm.
Quite a relatively small number of things that you could learn from an MBA, and I think it really needs to focus on moving geography. OP has got a very Italian and French academic
Mhm.
history here. Moving to the US and going to top US school does open up opportunities. That's what OP needs to focus on.
Yeah, yeah. I also think we could touch a little bit more on OP's entrepreneurial experience, creating that
Yeah,
interview prep platform and launching a mentoring program.
yeah,
Um,
that's
maybe
cool.
tie that into your narrative and
Particularly if it
goal.
links into the goals somehow. If your
Yeah.
long-term goals are some sort of entrepreneurial venture, you could point to this as your experience for being able to reach those goals.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Look, I think we fully roasted both of those profiles. Both of them strong. Both of you, good luck. Both of you get in touch if you would like to get some help checking your essays over, any inspiration, interview training as well. If either of you get through to interviews, we'll do mock interviews and help you prepare for those. Cool.
All right.
Done.
Great. So that's our first two profiles. Shall we move on to our third profile?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So this one is a request from one of our viewers, who's been following our roasts, and they sent this in via DM on Reddit, and yeah, well, let's get into it. Hi there, I saw your responses and kind of liked it. So please, could you tell me a few words about my profile? Background: 28 male, CEE, Central Eastern European region, underrepresented. Um, Education, Bachelor of Economics with an 8.3 GPA from the top university in my home country. Also has done a graduate degree in finance with a 4.7 out of 5 GPA. In a second country, which is Poland. GMAT 675, 5 years of work experience with 2 years at a Big Four and 3 years at a local M&A boutique. Note that the Big Four was gained concurrently with my studies. Extracurriculars: founder of a finance community for the CE region with 70 plus members focusing on mentoring and networking. Post MBA goal: pivot into a private equity mega fund. The pitch: leveraging a unique CEA expertise. Poland is a booming market. As the economy matures, I expect increased mutual fund activity. There's already corporate venture capital is already active there. I also plan to scale my finance community into primary regional hub. I see some target schools: HSW, T10, USC, Marshall, Anderson, Ross, Cornell. What do you think of OP's profile overall, Sam?
Interesting. CVC could be CVC, the company, as well as a private equity company called CVC. Interesting.
Oh,
Okay. And there, to be fair, their acronym might stand for corporate venture capital as well. I'm not sure. Okay, good. Let's start academically then. So I am looking at the undergrad, as I always do to start this off. 8.3 is solid. I'm not, to be fair, an expert on the grading systems in that part of the world, but it does sound pretty solid. I mean, if that's an 83% in the UK, 70% is a first. So one, however you cut it, I think that's probably quite a strong grade. But it's definitely from the top university, they will know that. They will recognize the brand of that university. They will know that that's a strong uni. They will not doubt your intelligence, basically. But as I've said before, they are not going to be able to convert, they're not going to be able to submit that GPA to the rankings either. So it doesn't carry quite as much weight as a 4.0 scale GPA. 675, it's not bad. It's not great. Just as our 675, same score as the last profile, and we were kind of pointing that as an Achilles heel. Now, OP is not mother tongue English. So I suspect that is because that score is 675 because of a slightly weaker verbal side and probably a stronger quant side. So that helps, but still, 675 is not ideal. So, from a professional perspective, 2 years of experience of Big Four transactions and 3 years of experience as a local M&A boutique. I was absolutely sure that OP is going to say, my goal is to pivot to investment banking. It's very often the case working in Big Four transactions where you're basically doing like due diligence on transactions, and counterparts are often investment banks, etc. Clients that hire you are often investment banks. Moving to an investment bank is a natural transition, and one of the small few groups of people who say they want to move into IB that I actually listen to, because a lot of people are like working in random roles and they say, I want to move into IB. And it's like, nah, forget it. This guy can. But that's not his goal. OP is talking about going into private equity. Now, I understand the reasoning, OP, but private equity is not almost ever a good post MBA goal. Why? Private equity is extremely nepotistic, and they tend to hire people from investment banks who they've already worked with. They don't have an established pipeline of MBAs generally, and if they do, it's very, very small. All these reasons combined, schools are very wary when you say private equity is your post MBA goal. Investment banking, on the other hand, would make a lot of sense as a stepping stone to private equity. So slightly nuanced goal change there. In terms of one thing I want to point out is we haven't talked about demographics yet. In terms of demographics, 28-year-old. Now, OP is saying underrepresented because he's in the Central Eastern Europe region, and that's kind of true. But to be honest, American business schools are more likely to look at you as a white male, and that is less underrepresented in business school admissions. So just be mindful of that. You're not as underrepresented as you think in the eyes of an American business school. In terms of the extracurriculars, this is cool. This finance community that you founded, this is a cool idea. It's really interesting. It's not massive, fine, 70 members, but I think founding that from scratch, growing to 70 members is quite an achievement. And I think they will appreciate that, particularly from a community building perspective, right? Not all extracurriculars are built equally. When I went into MBA applications, I did a bit of work at a homeless shelter thinking I'm helping the world and it's going to look really good on my resume. But there's not really community building there. Here, you're community building, you're creating community out of nothing, and business schools love that. Why? Because when you come into a business school for 1 or 2 years, you've got a bunch of people, hundreds of people who come together who don't know each other, and somebody there or a few people there are expected to create community out of that. And OP is saying he's done that before. So that is a very strong extracurricular, which will be a big positive for his application. So overall, a strong profile, not outstanding, but strong.
Okay. And what do you think about those schools then? Quite a few, all the way from HSW to the T20s. What are OP's chances at those schools?
Okay. That is a very wide range of target schools. Basically, if you're applying to Stanford and USC Marshall, Harvard and USC Marshall, you've misjudged somewhere. Your
Mm,
profile is either Stanford worthy or it's Marshall worthy, but you're wasting your time. If you apply to both, one of those is a total waste of time.
mm,
More likely, OP's somewhere in the middle. Now, I think that is the case here. I don't see anything unique enough for Harvard and Stanford, the H and the
mm,
S here. I would normally see something that is like a wow factor that would qualify OPs for those schools, particularly with a very mediocre GMAT. Um, I'm not seeing that wow factor. So I'm kind of cross at the top end of the range. I'm crossing out Harvard and Stanford. Wharton to me is probably OP's kind of where OP should be considering as a reach application. It's also very finance focused, and the experience OP's got aligns with, will align with that nicely. On the bottom end, I think OP's probably doing himself a bit of a disservice throwing USC Marshall, Anderson, maybe Ross into the mix. That's probably been a bit conservative. Now, apply if you want to use them as scholarship plays, but I think you'd really have to screw something up to not get an offer from those. So for me, OP's real sort of target range should be Wharton, the rest of the M7, and then the sort of the T10s. And probably maybe down as far as Cornell is probably where I would see OP applying. So hopefully that adds a little bit of color to this, because you've got to narrow it down. OP, that's a very wide range.
yeah. And what do you think OP can do to improve his profile?
Uh, Let's assume that OP is talking about September applications this coming year. We're currently mid-April. So you've got what? April, May, June, July, August. You've got 4 or 5 months. First thing, that from the extracurriculars perspective, keep working on that community. Build that out. It's obviously got quite a bit of momentum now. Not necessarily, not just the absolute number of members, right? Going from 70 to 80 would be cool. But I'm thinking more about creating stories for like your leadership essays, for example, for your application essays, for your difficult decision essays. Build that community, get involved in that community more, like host events, whatever it is you've been doing, supercharge that to
Mhm.
give yourself some more unique, more recent, more relevant stories. They will like that part of your profile. That's one. Two, that GMAT is not really as high as it should be. You could get into the schools that we're talking about, the Wharton down to sort of T10 range with 675. It's been done before, but it's not doing your profile any favors right now. So depending on how many times you've taken that test before, consider taking it again. Next, you've got to fix these goals. I mentioned this before. I understand it might be genuine that you want to go into private equity, and I understand why. They pay good money, blah, blah, blah. But going directly into PE from a business school is generally not very successful. It's difficult to do. Very few people manage it, and the schools know that. And so if you say, I want to go into PE, they're already thinking, oh my God, we're going to let this guy down. He's going to come on our program and then going to want to go into PE, and he's not going to be able to because they don't hire, there's not an established pipeline. They don't hire many MBAs directly out of business school. We're going to let this guy down, and they're going to be worried about that. Whereas if you say investment banking and they say, well, look, us, I don't know, Wharton, Cornell, whatever, we have 10 investment banks coming onto campus every year. All of them hire a couple of MBAs. This guy could easily be one of them. That's quite likely we're going to be able to place him offer.
Yeah.
So fix those goals. Admissions consultant can really help with that part of the process. And then narrow down the schools, right? Got to do some more research. If you're considering Stanford and Marshall, one of them is probably a waste of time. And so narrow those down. The best way to do that would be visiting the schools if possible. When I was applying for MBAs, I did a tour of the United States to visit schools that I was interested in. Not saying that's a bit extreme. You might not be able to do a full tour, but at least speak to some people,
Mhm.
check out the employment reports, dig into the stats in a bit more detail. Do have meetings with consultants who can guide you on this. But that's the other key thing that OP can do.
All right.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've answered all of OP's questions.
Great stuff.
Uh,
OP, I'm based in Barcelona, Central European time. I think you and I share a time zone. Very easy for us to meet, perhaps in the mornings, for example. Get in touch if I can help.
yeah. All right. Should we move on to our profile four for today?
Yeah, let's do it. So,
So, profile review, please. American female, a
mhm.
lawyer with 5 years of work experience, different areas of high stakes litigation in NYC, mostly business litigation with a side of medical malpractice. 3.75 undergrad GPA from a May school, but 2.78 GPA from a law school. But OP had some pretty severe circumstances leading to that GPA. GRE of 325. OP also has two additional alternative dispute resolution certifications and a finance certificate. OP is looking at Haas, Anderson, Kellogg, Ross, Booth, Rice, Stuck. Also wanted to apply to INSEAD and LBS, but that might make job placement in the US harder for consulting. So OP's goal is to move into consulting. What do you think overall? And if
Yeah.
you down to the comments, OP has expanded on that goal a little further.
Uh-huh.
Right there, yeah. Opi says consulting for a few years, ideally followed by exiting into a strategy role somewhere, nothing to do with law or legal practice whatsoever. That's
Okay. Interesting. I'm just looking at some of these comments getting downvoted.
yeah. Yeah, someone's out for blood here.
Okay. So let's do a quick overview of this profile. Short but sweet text there. That's cool. 3.75 is solid. It's about 3.6 is the GPA average of the top of the M7 business schools. The Mayor school doesn't help, but it's not going to be a blocker either. So fine. They do not care about the GPA of your masters. You're
Mm-hmm.
not getting, their schools aren't getting ranked on this. They don't have to submit it to the Financial Times. They don't have to submit it to US News. So they don't really care about it. Plus, it's law school. It's very industry specific. It's not going to say, especially with the severe circumstances, they're not going to say that you are not smart enough for an MBA. It doesn't point that way at all. It's 325 GRE. That, if we're going to use the word meh, I would say that's meh, especially for someone who, if you've done the LSAT, for example, and you've been in law school and you work in business litigation, I imagine your verbal score is very, very high. And that tells me that the quant score is not very high. That might be a concern. That might be a concern. Not really, don't really care that much about the certificates. These are industry specific. They don't count towards the school's rankings. Yeah, it paints you as an accomplished professional a bit. Not really going to lend itself to any essays because what are you going to write about? Like when I was studying for my certification, like no one cares. So that's not going to be that much of a factor either. Not do any harm, but not a factor. In terms of demographics, American female, good demographic to be for business school applications. You're going to qualify for a lot of scholarships, a lot of female focused scholarships in the US. They're not going to worry about your visa status after you graduate, etc. So really good good demographic to be part of. No mention of extracurriculars here. I know it's a short short submission, but I'm worried that there might not be many extracurriculars going on. OP is obviously working many, many hours in high stakes litigation in New York. Doesn't have that much time to volunteer at a homeless shelter or whatever it may be. I'm worried that there might not be any extracurriculars there. That could be a pink flag, potentially. Let's talk about these goals. I'm not in love with consulting as a goal, period. Why? There are loads of people saying consulting is their post MBA goal. It's probably the most common post MBA goal. Right. Is that a problem? Well, you're going up against a massive pool of candidates, and especially candidates from the MBBs, the McKinsey, Baines, and BCGs, who are the top tier of schools. Sorry, top tier of management consultancies, who a lot of them have guaranteed return offers, and McKinsey, Bain, BCG is paying for their MBA. And you're going to go up against them. You've got a better chance of securing a McKinsey offer than someone who has a contract signed to go back to McKinsey and who McKinsey are paying for their MBA. You don't want to go against that person. You don't want to go against that person, trust me. So I don't love consulting as a goal, but
Mhm.
certainly as a goal that you're telling the schools. Obviously, once you're on the program and you can do some recruiting for consulting, yeah, feel free to try. But I don't like it as a goal to tell the schools. Now, that's one thing. Let's assume OP does still decide to put consulting as their post MBA goal against advice, still decides to do it. LBS and INSEAD do place people into consultancies. INSEAD is known to be a consultant factory. It's like 40% of the graduates go into consulting. Now, some of that, a large proportion of that will be in Europe, particularly in London. So if OP is willing, if you are willing as a consultant, an American consultant, to do a few years for perhaps in the London office, for example, before moving back to the US, if you're open to that stepping stone, I'm not worried. You should not be worried about doing an INSEAD or LBS MBA to get you back to the United States eventually. If you want to recruit directly into consulting in the US, then obviously the UK and European schools are not the best place to do that from.
Mhm.
But it sounds like OP genuinely wants INSEAD and LBS. I would say do it, change your short term goal from consulting, or keep it as consulting, but say you're going to do it in London for a couple of years. And then you get to throw your hat in the ring for INSEAD and LBS, which you might genuinely enjoy as a more than just a business school experience. You get a bit of international experience as well. So, yeah, definitely worth, I think, worth considering those applications.
Okay. And what about the US schools? Do you think OP is competitive for those?
Yeah, I do. I do. This is a relatively conservative list of schools. These are okay. So Kellogg is bottom of the M7, Booth is bottom of the M7, but the other schools in there are not M7 and they're not especially difficult. I think I would bet good money that OP will get an offer from one of those and probably with some decent scholarship money as well if their application is watertight.
Hmm. And OP wants to know if there's any other school that she might be a good shot at.
Hmm. So the one that jumped to mind for me, I don't know OP very well, obviously, but the one that jumped to mind was NYU Stern. OP's already in New York. The US base, the New York schools, namely Columbia and NYU, they really like people who've already got their base in New York.
Mhm.
That historically, our clients that have already based in New York have had a really good success rate with NYU and Columbia. Why? Let's think about this. Your extracurriculars that you're involved in are already likely to be on the ground in New York. You're already having an impact there. You're not just one of these candidates that's like, I'm applying to NYU Stern because I want to move to New York. Those people get crossed off. So you're at an advantage already for NYU Stern. Plus, we've had every year almost, we've had female American candidates receive full ride offers from NYU Stern. So if you think about it, like you don't necessarily have to move. You can keep your social network and your friends and your family or whatever nearby. You could get a full ride offer. Goal is consulting, maybe Stern is a good school for that. So for me, NYU Stern is a really good fit for OP that should be considered. Now, if your goal is to do an MBA to move away, then obviously Stern's not for you, but worth considering it.
Mm. Okay, I think we've covered everything for OP.
Cool.
Should we move on to our bonus question?
Yeah, let's do it. Difficult decision, this one.
Yes, that's a long list of schools. Okay.
Let's run through
Full-time,
them fairly quickly, shall we?
yeah,
Because there's a lot there.
yeah, yeah, conscious of time. Full-time versus part-time MBA. Uh, I will admit I'm super blessed to be in this position. Yes, you are OP. Quick background, 25 first gen, 5 years of experience in FP&A. Had an executive assessment score of 153 with a 3.97 GPA. The goal is S&O or corp strategy at a tech company. Would also be open to a leadership development program of some sort. Currently making 115K base salary and some extra money through side hustles. OP has offers from Ross with a 120K scholarship, Carnegie Mellon Tepper with a full tuition, Kellogg part-time admitted is asking for some scholarship, Booth part-time with 30K, Vanderbilt with full tuition and Dean scholarship, Emory with a full ride, Indiana Kelly with a full ride and a Dean's Fellowship as well. OP's waitlisted up a couple of schools, but the real decision here is that OP's just received a 170K remote job offer, which makes this quite complicated. OP has three options. Option one is the Ross full-time degree, which is a tier T11 school. It has strong recruiting in OP's desired industry, but the con is that OP will have to leave Chicago and give up that 170K income. Option B, TEPA full-time, full tuition, is elite in tech and AI, but the same opportunity cost as Ross, only 40K cheaper because of the scholarship. And option C is a Series G cybersecurity company, which is the offer that OP's received, plus a part-time degree at Kellogg or Booth, in which case OP can keep earning that money and do his degree at the same time and stay in Chicago as well. So OP says, my thought is Ross full tuition, or I stay in Chicago with Kellogg or Booth part-time plus a new job. Am I thinking about this the right way? And the job market is also a concern for OP right now, with recruitment getting more competitive each year. What would you do, Sam?
Very good position to be in, sir. Well played. There's a few different components to this decision, so I want to break it down for you. So the first factor is choosing between part-time versus full-time MBAs. Right, this is a classic dilemma that lots of people before you have had. There are several factors. Right, a full-time MBA, you leave your job, you get a clean cut and a fresh start entirely. What that means is that if you're looking to pivot, a full-time MBA program can allow that. If you're bored of your industry, you have some sort of big dream, a full-time MBA is far more likely to let that happen. You've got a couple of years to think about your life, to choose your classes, really immerse yourself in a new industry, which you wouldn't have if you're doing a part-time program. So that's one. The other factor, though, on the other hand, is the risk involved, obviously. By staying in your work, not only do you continue building up, you continue earning, well, in this case, 170K a year in salary. You don't need to annihilate your savings to go to do an MBA. And crucially, you're still in the job market throughout the process. So you've still got recruiters pinging you with offers. You're still plugged into the industry and really familiar with its trends. And you're in less of a needy position when it comes to recruiting because you've already got 170K. You don't need to move to any job. You can be a bit more selective. So that's the sort of the flip side to this. Now, one other factor is that, and we must remember this, is that the job market will not look the same in 3 years' time. It might be worse, it might be better, but it will not look the same as it currently is. So try and kind of look further out and look towards the longer term. That's really where OP's focus should be, in my opinion. The short-term impact is relatively negligible. The long-term could be really substantial. So then the choice, we've talked about full-time versus part-time. Then the choice is between, let's say you're just looking at the full-time programs. You've got a bunch of offers in here. Personally, my favorite is Ross in this list. From a brand perspective, from a scholarship perspective, if you can get a full tuition offer from Ross, that should be very difficult to turn down. That's probably the strongest, in my opinion. Balancing brand and as you say, the tech focus of CMU TEPA, that would be my focus. So, and I think OP is on the same wavelength of the full-time programs. Ross full tuition is his preference. So, are you thinking about this the right way? Yes, probably that's a good sign that you are. Now, to slight caveat on that, or slight comment on that, is if you don't get the full tuition, then what? I would say the difference between the TEPA, for example, a full tuition versus 120K scholarship, we're talking probably 50, 60K. Try and look through that. I know it's a lot of money, but in the long-term scheme of things, try not to let that difference cloud your judgment. I still think Ross would probably be the winner if it's a full-time program you want. Okay, So for me, basically, it comes down to, are you looking to pivot your work? Have you got big dreams? Or are you content in where you are? Do you enjoy your industry? A lot of people do. Nothing wrong with that. Do you like your industry? Are you saving some of this 170K? Because if you're putting aside, good money on a regular basis, you're investing cleverly, you can build a foundation and you can build financial independence using that as your cash flow and using that as a base. There's nothing wrong with that at all, especially in today's job market and today's recruiting environment. That is super interesting and understandable. So, are you looking for a pivot? Do you have big dreams? Or are you going to build your own financial security using this role? That's your question. If the financial security option appeals, the Kellogg and Booth part time MBA programs are really the right way to go. And I would absolutely be doing one of those. One other thing I'm going to throw in the mix, bit of a spanner in this, just because why not? Because we're here. Personally, I think you can probably do better.
Mm,
Now, it's again, he's done well, but could he do
mm,
better? What do I mean by that? Generally speaking, when I see full tuition offers, that tends to be your safeties. When we're working with clients to apply for business schools, if scholarships are really important, we often include some safer schools in the mix that we hope scholarships are going to come for. To me, that says that CMU, that Ross, that Goiswetter, these are your safety schools where you've got full rides from, and nicely done. But it also suggests that there are schools higher up the ranking that you could qualify for. So the option D, if you will, the curveball that I'm going to throw into the mix is get that EA/GMAT/GRE a little bit higher and apply to the M7 schools, full-time programs. Because I would argue that if you can get into a Columbia, well, I would argue that if you can get into these schools with full rides, you're probably in the running for a Columbia, for a full-time at Booth, for a full-time at Kellogg, maybe even Wharton with a 3.97 GPA. And if that is the case, that is a different proposition entirely. And in that case, I would choose option D.
mm. Okay. That I think that's another option for OP. Not really helping him decide.
Yeah, I think we've given him some color. I think the main thing is, look, you're thinking about this the right way. That was the question.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah. Definitely some food for thought and a great
Good stuff.
position to be in, OP.
Congratulations. And if you do go down that reapplication route, get in touch. I think we can frame this profile quite nicely.
Yes. All right. That's all of our profiles for today. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you very much, as always, for trawling the depths of Reddit to find these little hidden gems amongst all the crap that's going on in Reddit. Thank you very much for that, and I'll see you next week for Roast 52. I think it'll be.
Yes. See you next week.
See ya.